Welcome to the Sherman Report. Here's Peter Sherman.
Well, week 2 for the Sherman Report. And first, thank you all. I looked at the video views of last week's shows over the weekend, and apparently you liked them, considering last week was our first effort, and I purposely had no guests. The numbers are fine and growing, so there are a number of you out there who are interested. But now that I am more at ease with the audio and video controls, and that's while trying to talk lucidly to you, I'm comfortable enough to welcome some people you'll recognize and others who may be new to you, but who are joining me because they have something to say. If you live in the Toronto area or Southern Ontario generally, you would know the name Jack Berkovits. Jack and I first met as he put in long hours building his jewelry business, Omni Jewel Crafters, and used extensive radio advertising to give it that extra push. I was working at one of the major radio stations then, and Jack's ads were ubiquitous. They were just everywhere. Once weekly, he'd come into the radio station in person and go on the air with the host, and that was sometimes me. He'd offer special deals to the audience. It worked well, and Jack has always been a success. We're somewhat alike. We can never stop doing things. Perhaps that's why we became personal friends. Talking into a microphone, for example, and addressing a multitude of people appealed to Jack, and these days, he has a morning radio show of his own on a smaller West End, Toronto, Mississauga radio station known as Mississauga or Sauga 960. He has an opinion on everything, and today he'll be with me in less than 15 minutes to talk about what has been an ugly situation in the Middle East and one that could get quite a bit uglier soon. Stay tuned for that and listen throughout the week. We have guests all week, and that means lively discussions. Meanwhile, I have a few comments to make on several subjects. Do you remember Bill Barr? He's a heavyset man, wears glasses, and was for a time Attorney General of the United States under George H.W. Bush, and later, and this is where you'll remember him, under Donald Trump, the first Donald Trump, not the one that wants to be president again in November. Is he coming back if Trump wins in November? Well, I doubt it because he hasn't said very nice things about the old boss since then. But Mr. Barr is in the news because he is writing about a legal decision in Massachusetts involving Harvard University and Jewish students, suing that institution, suing Harvard, because they felt fearful and neglected during the protest occupation on university grounds, connected as it was to the Middle East situation, which we'll be talking about with Jack. Just because Mr. Barr is a legal scholar in the United States doesn't mean his thoughts mightn't apply here in Canada, which is why I'm talking about them. A federal judge in Massachusetts made a ruling last week that was designed to send a message to university administrations everywhere. The judge, Richard Stearns, said that the case filed by the students could proceed. Harvard had tried to block it. The judge basically said that Harvard failed to protect the civil rights of Jewish students. In fact, because of what the students say and the way Judge Stearns views the situation, he wrote that the Jewish students felt harassed, intimidated, and violently attacked by their peers. Strong words. So it's about whether Harvard had a duty of care to those students and whether they were let down. Mr. Barr wrote this: Harvard urged the judge to dismiss the case, arguing that campus administrators had done enough to combat anti-Semitism by issuing condemnations of it, holding listening sessions about it, pulling together a task force on it, and pledging to take action against it. But Judge Stearns refused. He rightly observed that federal civil law demands more than denunciations. It requires meaningful action. Dismissal of the case, he reasoned, would reward Harvard for virtuous public declarations which, for the most part, according to the students, proved hollow. Mr. Barr went on to say this: university leaders have both the authority and the means to put a stop to anti-Semitic conduct, but it appears that they are making a deliberate choice not to. America's colleges and universities are thickly papered over with campus regulations, anti-discrimination policies, codes of conduct, and disciplinary processes. Yet in many cases, administrators are suspending the rules when it comes to protecting Jews. For example, campus time, place, and manner regulations prohibit the sorts of encampments we have seen at Harvard, at Columbia, at UC Berkeley, and others. But campus administrators allowed encampments to stay in place while participants harassed Jewish students, denied them access to areas of the campus, and even physically assaulted them. The case, when it goes to court, will be interesting. Why? Because despite differences in the law between the United States and Canada, we experienced some level of similar disruption to Jewish campus life in places like McGill University in Montreal and in Toronto, where I am, at the University of Toronto, not to mention a number of others. I would be offended by these actions if they caused fear or intimidation to any group as a Jewish Canadian myself. I am personally offended by people who rank me lower on the human scale simply because Israel and Hamas are at war. And I might remind you that the war began unexpectedly with an attack by Hamas against Israel last October, and now threatens to include Hezbollah, parked in Lebanon as they are, ISIS over in Syria, and the Iranian military, the army, which has been directly warned by the United States to stay away, which is in itself amazing because the United States has no diplomatic relationship with Iran, at least not directly. I suspect we'll be talking about this at greater length when Jack joins us, Jack Berkovits, in just a few moments. In the meantime, a couple more comments. This second one, also about a war. Be careful what you wish for, Vladimir Putin. While heavy fighting continues in the easternmost part of Ukraine, known as the Donetsk, what a surprise to find Ukrainian fighters busy inside Western Russia. Does that mean they'll march all the way to Moscow? Well, of course not. The manpower, the weapons of war, the necessary supply chains could never be assembled. But it struck me as interesting that Russia was so busy northward that they took their eye off the ball southward. Ukrainian military personnel have been inside Russia for about a week and launched the largest such attack since the start of the war back in February of 2022. The most significant aspect of this is that it took Moscow totally by surprise and Russian military leaders scrambling to end it. Some embarrassment. Why did this happen? And particularly in the area it did? Because it seems Ukraine is striving to draw the attention of Russian units away from intense fighting in the Russian-claimed Donetsk area of Ukraine. That's the area that Russia wants the most. One presidential advisor suggested that this may be about holding a few more cards in any eventual negotiation with Russia to end the conflict. Yes, we all wish. One more comment. For a newspaper that most observers color left, the Toronto Star, Canada's largest daily, is certainly piling on where the staying power of Justin Trudeau is concerned. Lots of articles and polling recently about that in the Star. Two savvy writers for that paper, Susan Delacourt and Matt Gurney, liberal and conservative respectively, are talking about this in the paper in dialogue format. Ms. Delacourt suggests an upcoming caucus meeting of the Liberals in Nanaimo will discuss their communication situation and asks if this is just what the warden in Cool Hand Luke once described as a failure to communicate. Matt Gurney agrees that there have been comms flops, but doesn't think that's the issue. He's chalking up the Liberals' poor current ranking to being around for long enough that people have grown tired of Trudeau's words, which are getting tired as well, stale and out of touch. Well, Matt, you and I always had more to agree about than the other way around. So here's a quote from Matt Gurney. They're angry about issues that the government has, at the very least, been caught napping on or worse. And you can't out-comms that. To the extent any Liberal remains focused on their communications as the problem, I'd honestly say their real problem is denial. That's Matt Gurney. Peter Sherman says, I think one of the biggest problems for Justin Trudeau is people don't like him anymore. They don't like the carbon tax or the carbon rebate or whatever it's being called this week. They don't like the deficit budget in inflationary times. They know that that budget contributed to what they pay for gas and butter now more than Galen Weston does. They are tired of flip answers like, because it's 2015, when once asked why he had originally split his cabinet down the middle 50-50 on gender, or sporting the fancy socks, or the actor's tone he likes to use to talk down to us when lecturing us, which he does. It's August, people. Maximum time to the next election is 14 months. That's maximum time. I'll be back in a moment with Jack Berkovits, jeweler, broadcaster, and something else I just found out about.
You're with the Sherman Report, daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
All right, we are back, and I'm looking at him, and you can look at him too. Here's Jack Berkovits, and I've been talking about you, Jack, as you probably heard, because you've been sitting in the green room, and I hope I did you justice.
Well, the truth is I've been having audio problems, so I didn't hear a word of what you were saying. You just came on live right now. So I don't know what you said about me, but I know that our friendship is such that you would only say the most wonderful things about me as I would about you. We go back many, many years to Montreal. And I think I mentioned to you yesterday that you're truly inspirational. I mean that sincerely because we're both not youngsters. We both should be retiring and sitting on the beach. We both can do that financially. And we both choose to continue to get up every morning with something important to do. And what you're doing, Peter, super important. I'd like to give you a blessing. You know that I'm an ordained rabbi. So my blessings, I am. So my blessings have some clout with the one above. I hope it'll have much clout here. I want to give you and Carol tremendous health, happiness, and the ability to continue to do what you're doing on a daily basis for many years to come.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. And I'll take it as a blessing coming from, there's another title that I can add to your CV. You're a rabbi. And by the way, I hope the fact that you didn't hear me for the first period of the show means that other people didn't hear me either. We'll find that out later.
Well, there was a message on my screen that says that I'm in backstage and you can let me in whenever you choose. So I'm guessing that I'm the only one that could not hear you. I'm certainly hoping because there's so many listening and very happy to hear you on the air again. Welcome back.
You'd be surprised how many showed up the first week. I'm really pleased with that.
No.
We seem to be growing.
No, I would not be surprised.
I'll tell you, it's hard to advertise without having great big money. However, this is fun to do, and I'm delighted that you're with us, and you also are our first guest. And before we get into the subject at hand, I just want to say thank you for all of the kind words. And
not a word of exaggeration either.
Well,
as a matter
there's
of fact,
one thing that you exaggerated on. I tried the whole business of retirement, okay? And you overdid it when you said that I had enough money to stay retired. But I'll be okay, and I can't ever retire. It's just not in my makeup.
Well, the only reason you might not have enough money to stay retired is because I just blessed you with long life. So you're going to be around for many years to come. Nobody has enough money for that, especially in Canada. But I do believe that you'll be around for many years, and I do believe you'll make money and continue to augment the money you have in savings. And you're way too humble. You're not a poor man, and don't try to pretend that you are.
Okay, Jack. Let's get into a nastier subject. We've been complimenting each other, but we're also watching out of the corner of our eyes because I checked with mainstream television over the course of the afternoon, and some of the channels are putting a little box at the right-hand corner with a picture of live in Tel Aviv, where, of course, it's already past midnight. And it's almost as if they're waiting on a moment-to-moment basis for the first missile to be lobbed by Iran. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's as dangerous right now as it's ever been. And this all goes back ostensibly to the bomb killing of Ismail Haniyeh, one of the main leaders of Hamas. Hamas, of course, started the whole war. I can't even begin to explain it to so many people who ask.
Well, I've got 25 grandchildren who live in Jerusalem right now. I have my only sister who lives in Rehovot, Israel, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv. And I can tell you, while everybody's trying to pretend that life is normal and everything will be okay by the grace of God, you've got to be an idiot not to be concerned about the potential for a bomb to land on your doorstep. This has been brewing for many, many years. In 2005, as you know, Israel handed back the keys to Gaza to the Gazans and have not only did they evacuate Gaza completely, not only did they leave in Gazans' hands all the incredible things that they had built, garden houses and greenhouses that were feeding the world with flowers, but they even took from Gaza every single remaining burial plot. Not only was there no living Jew left in Gaza in 2005, there was not even a buried Jew left in Gaza in 2005. So those who want to pretend that the Israelis are colonialists, let's debunk that from the first moment. In 2005, the past is no more. The Gazans got the keys and they controlled Gaza. The only thing that they did not control is the border and the security angle of that border. Like every other two countries in the world have, you need to have security from your neighbor. No one calls the Egyptians colonialists. They share a border with Gaza. Only the Jews, the Israelis, are considered colonialists. But that's history. Right now we have a country that elected a Hamas government from the outset and never had an election since then. Yesterday, a man an Arab Gazan had his throat slit because he dared on camera to scream, the Jews are not the enemy, Hamas is the enemy. We need to rid ourselves of Hamas. For that, he was slaughtered by Hamas. So, notwithstanding the fact that every poll in Gaza seems to indicate that 96% of Gazans actually support Hamas, anyone who speaks up is dead. So you've got a country that is totally self-sufficient in terms of their borders, totally self-sufficient in terms of their tax revenues, and yet they have in their constitution a one-state solution, never a two-state solution. That is the ultimate crux of the problem. And as long as that problem...
Can you explain one thing before you go on to our viewers? In fact, I, as a Jewish man, have never understood this myself. How is it that if you're Russia and you attack Ukraine, Ukrainians fight back and slaughter what now is in the six figures number of Russians, and nobody says that Ukraine didn't have the right to fight back? But as soon as somebody attacks Israel and Israel fights back, the whole world seems to say, no, Jews aren't supposed to fight back.
Well,
it's the way it seems to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, why is that?
I mean, a better question is, why is nobody attacking and demonstrating against the Russians for attacking the sovereign state of Ukraine?
I guess it's okay.
It's okay. So, all of those of us, and I'm one of these people who are guilty of this, all those of us who continue to search for a reason why they hate the Jews and thereby the Israelis are forever going to fail to come up with a solution because there is no reason. Are we rich? For as many as there are rich, there are poor. Are we smart? For as many that there are smart, there are stupid. Are we better looking? We're not. Are we taller? We're not. Are we better at sports? We're not. Are we a great contributor to the world? We are. And yet the world says the reason that people hate the Jews is because they're rich, they're powerful, they control the banks, they control industry, they control Hollywood, they control everything. And that's the reason to hate the Jews. But they hated us before we controlled anything, and we don't control anything. There's only one reason, and it's very clearly stated in the Bible. Two brothers, Esau and Jacob. Esau, according to the Bible, in these words, Esau hates Jacob. Esau is the father of Islam. Jacob is the father of Jews. Islam hates Jews. Don't look for a reason it doesn't exist, because if it did exist, we could fix it. We could give up Hollywood. We could give up the banks. We could give up the Nobel Prizes. We could stop making peace and scientific research. We could stop producing Waze and Google and Facebook and everything wonderful in the world. We could do all that. It wouldn't take the anti-Semitism away.
It obviously wouldn't, because anti-Semitism predates any other religion. It goes back, anti-Semitism is recorded history for over 2,000 years. Christianity was formed after that. Islam was formed after that. So there's something in our makeup. Maybe it's the first monotheistic religion that bothers people so much. I don't know. But I don't control Hollywood. I don't control banks. I don't control any of that. And neither do you. And neither do most of the people we know. In fact, I think the word about Hollywood being controlled by anybody is long gone as well. So all of that stuff is just repetition of the past. And here we are looking in 2024 at a war that by tomorrow, and I'm not overstating the case, by tomorrow could be something that envelops the Middle East from the north in Lebanon, from the west in Gaza, to the extent of what's left there, to the east, ISIS or what remains of that in Syria, and certainly from the south, Iran from far away, but with enough ballistic power to get into Israel. And the United States all over the region saying, If Iran gets involved, so are we. That's pretty darn scary.
It is. And as you know, tonight here in Canada, we're about to commemorate the holiday of Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. It's the day that 3,000 years ago, the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem and burned to the ground the greatest edifice in the history of mankind, the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. They rebuilt it 500 years later on the same day, on Tisha B'Av, which is tonight. Excuse me. They again, this time the Romans conquered Jerusalem and burnt it to the ground. And every major disastrous day in Jewish history is surrounded or included or specific to the holiday of Tisha B'Av. Tonight, we start a fast of 25 hours, no food, no drink, no sex, no comforts of any kind, no leather shoes, no sitting on a regular chair, but rather on a smaller, lower chair that's meant to be uncomfortable. No physical or other pleasures allowed tonight. The reason I mention this is because in Israel, it is 7 hours later right now. So we're now talking 12:30 midnight. And I suspect that Iran is fully aware of the harsh nature of this day in Jewish history. And I suspect, and we'll find out in the next 2 or 3 hours, that Iran will launch their ballistic missiles tonight within 3 or 4 hours. So
well, you're not the first person who I've heard say that today. In fact, non-Jewish commentators on commercial television have been citing exactly the same thing, that this would be an appropriate merging of something that Jews hold dear and on which they do the equivalent of, you described it, sitting Shiva for all of these, the people who were killed in past massacres and so forth. And that would be the appropriate day for Iran to attack. I've got to ask this other question rather than belabor that point. What's it going to take to stop this cycle?
So we're 20 years away, and it's got to start today. What we've got to do is stop allowing the education of the Gazan children, and Palestinian children, Lebanese children from birth and from their mother's milk to hear and cater to the Arab population and the hatred and the animosity. And once they do that, that generation will then grow into people that love peace and stop hating. That's what it's going to take. How do we get there? I think the American clout, the Qatari clout, the Saudi Arabian clout, the money clout has to kick in and say that unless you change your system of education, we will stop funding you. So instead of giving them money to build tunnels, instead of giving them money to build ballistic missiles and smuggle all kinds of weapons, the money has to be contingent on a change of attitude that comes from the current educators that will pass on to the children, and we will eventually have peace, but not until that happens. They've got the wrong root of the problem. The root of the problem is the hatred that mothers provide to their children through the milk that they breastfeed them and everything thereafter. That's the solution.
Well, you know, you mentioned a couple of things in there, and they kind of went by. First of all, you talk about the money as if it's provided by the Western world and it funds all of these things. Certainly, that's partially true. On the other hand, you now have an Iran that produces petroleum and has a steady stream of cash flow. And given that it has cash flow, it can manufacture weapons of war and it can supply them to its proxies. So that's one thing that's a problem. And the other thing is you've got the get piece. Now, let me turn it positive and throw this at you. Before this happened back in October, and some people relate the October attack to this, we were seeing the implementation of the Abrahamic Accords, which were developed under the last Trump administration, mainly by his son-in-law, who sold the idea to a number of Arab nations. And so we have people at the level of the United Arab Emirates, I believe Morocco, Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken, who are signatories, I guess you'd call them, to the Abrahamic Accords, which effectively, if it were spread throughout the Islamic world, and let me say the Arab world in that area, 20 some odd countries, could result in a new era for Israel and the entire Middle East of all of those nations where proper positive relationships existed. And there were plenty of strong rumors to the effect that even Saudi Arabia was signing on to that. Then along comes October 7th and nobody's signing anything. Put all of that together and make sense of it for me.
Well, first of all, back to the point of money, that is the solution to everything, unfortunately. And that is 4 years ago, Iran was on the brink of collapse. That was because of Donald Trump's sanctions that were very effective. As soon as Joe Biden took over and the Democrats took over, and they dumped the support for Israel, and they opened up, canceled all the sanctions, allowed money to flow back to Iran. Iran became powerful once again, is on the verge, literally today, of nuclear weapons. And when that happens, no bets are on. Everything, all bets are off. Saudi Arabia is extremely amenable to joining the Abraham Accords. But Saudi Arabia makes the mistake that every other country is making throughout the world, including the United States, where they feel that because Israel is the better child, the child more likely to accede to their demands, more amenable to giving in because they're more dependent than Iran right now, everybody feels that the solution is to pressure Israel. That is not the solution. Israel's fighting an existential battle. They're not amenable to doing anything because when they lay down their arms, they're dead. When the Arabs lay down their arms, there's peace. So the pressure should be on Iran, not on anyone else. And Trump proved that. Trump actually proved that. So what they've got to do, they've got to get Saudi Arabia, which is ready. They're ready. They're like literally a minute away from signing, but they want Israel to have a ceasefire first. Israel can't agree to a ceasefire as long as there's somebody there that has a gun pointed to their head that says we're going to wipe you out. So
this is the irresistible force in the immovable object, Jack.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. But they've got to move the object is Iran, and they can't be moved because at the end of the day, sanctions will destroy them. They need to have sanctions put on them. America has to tell them right now in no uncertain terms, if you dare launch anything against Israel, you'll be facing the force of the United States of America. They've done that, but Iran doesn't believe it because Joe Biden has become famous for don't. And don't means nothing.
He's the guy who holds the levers of power right now. Even if you want to consider him a lame duck, he has to give that order. He's been out there today again saying don't. And I don't like the idea of having to get to the point where we find out how honest he is in saying don't and pulls the trigger on the one hand. On the other hand, he is the guy who has left 2 carrier battle groups in the Red Sea since October, more or less, and has now brought another battle group into the Gulf of Oman. Very close proximity to Iran. I have a feeling that if it gets to be a shooting war, there are going to be a lot of missiles flying in various directions.
If there gets to be a shooting war where Iran will be exposed as an absolutely incapable, inept military power, Iran can't afford for that to happen. So they now have a problem. They've got a problem of being humiliated once a few months ago, and they have a problem of potentially being humiliated again. So they will not launch something very severe that will demand a response from Israel. Israel has proven twice that they're right there. They've got a gun to Khamenei's head. They did it by assassinating Ismail Haniyeh. They did it by destroying the mite next to the actual nuclear reactor right in Iran from a military weapon that was launched from next door, meaning within Iran. So the point of those 2 attacks by Israel was exactly that. We're there. We're with you. We don't have to launch from Israel. We are your next door neighbor in your country. Iran can't afford to gamble on that. So I suspect very strongly that whatever attack will happen tonight or in the next little while will be muted.
Proportional.
Yes, the attack will be such that it will not invite a response from Israel, and everybody will feel that they've saved face, and everything will go on. But Israel,
however, Jack, in the final analysis, and with this, I think I'll take your answer and we'll wrap it up. What ultimately has to happen in Iran for normalization of relationships between all of the countries in the region is the mullahs have to be overthrown. That's what's going to have to happen. The non-religious portion of the population, which is by far the biggest portion, is going to have to say, we don't want this kind of government anymore. And Iran is going to have to go back to what it once was. The Shah may have had his problems, but it was a terrific country that educated its people, had freedom for women, as far as I can remember, tolerated gay people, all of those things, and it's all gone by the boards. It has to be overthrown.
The biggest mistake in American foreign policy was 1979 when they totally abandoned the Shah of Iran, who was an incredibly wonderful gift of a ruler for his people. The Iranian people are magnificent, beautiful, kind, and good people. It is the mullahs, as you point out so well, that are the problem. Their time will come. I have a lot of friends in Iran. I have a lot of Iranians who live here, and nobody wants the mullahs to run the country. So the mullahs are aware of that. The mullahs have to rule with an iron fist, and they have to do something to save face because they keep threatening and doing nothing. You'll see the next few days will make a difference.
Jack Berkovits, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I think we could probably do an hour of this, but you know an awful lot about the Middle East, and I take your answers advisedly and seriously.
Pleasure to be your guest, and continued success, Peter, and say hello to Carol for me.
Will do. Take care.
Thank you.
Same to Shiva. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. That's our friend Jack Berkovits, obviously a friend for a number of years of Omni Jewel Crafters, but talking now as a mainstream Orthodox Jew here in Toronto. That's the end of our show for today. Tomorrow, two guests. We'll have Kevin Godet joining us. You might know that name. He has run in the past for the Conservative Party of Ontario. PC Party of Ontario is the way I should term it. But he is a government relations specialist and runs a company called Bright Spark. And we'll also have Andy Stinton with us. If you listen to radio in Toronto, any of the main talk stations, you know who he is. He's the small businessman. However, we'll reveal what he really is when we see you tomorrow, right here on the Sherman Report. Thanks so much for tuning in.
The Sherman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petersherman.com. Thanks for listening to the Sherman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petersherman.com.